Now I just want to take a few slides here and talk very specifically about sand. Because sand and sandstones, right, that's when it forms a hard rock, actually tells us a lot about that specific environment. So when we look at a sand itself, there's three components that we look at, right? First, how much quartz, right, is in our sand, how much feldspar is in our sand, and how much everything else, right, is in our sand. So those are the three things that we're definitely going to look for. And we're going to look at different ratios of them. What we see is that sands that are dominated by quartz tend to be much more mature than sands that have a whole bunch of other material mixed in. So let's take a look at what I mean here. So there's four major types of sandstone. We have quartz sandstone, arkose, greywacke, and lithic sandstone. A quartz sandstone is dominated by quartz, right? So if you remember back in the last chapter when we talked about granite and how it erodes, remember I told you the one mineral that's going to remain the same the whole time is always quartz. So when I see a quartz sandstone, this is telling me it is very mature. All of the other grains have essentially been beaten out. They've turned into clay over time. Right? So all that's left is just quartz. My next one is arkose, and arkose contains at least 25% feldspar, which is that pink mineral. So arkose is not as mature as quartz sandstone. It's got that feldspar in there. Now, if I let arkose sit out and weather, over time it could turn into a quartz sandstone, right? Because all of that feldspar would kind of get beaten out of it. Now, a greywacke is the color that it states, it's gray. What we tend to see is a greywacke is sand that's mixed with silt and clay, right? So it tends to be gray because of that silt and clay, the mud, okay, that's in there. And when we see this, this usually means we're in an area that's pretty tectonically active. There's a lot of erosion. There might be lots of volcanics that's mixing in here. Now, our lithic sandstone is the least mature because it has lots of other things in there as well. In here we see lots of quartz, muscovite, chert, rock fragments, all different kinds of stuff. This is what we see in our deltas. Right, so this is delta rock. This is what's made up of Louisiana. So, right, we can go from most mature to least mature, and it's really just looking at that quartz component. The more quartz there is, the more mature it is. So let's see what these rocks look like. So as you guessed it, a quartz sandstone is white because it's composed of all of that quartz. Like I said, this is telling us that this is a sand that's been in the system for a while. It's been worked over. All of the other minerals have been beaten out of it. Our arkose tends to have a little bit of a pink hue to it because feldspar, the mineral itself, is pink. Remember, it's not quite as mature. It hasn't been around quite as long as quartz sandstone, but it's been around for a little while. Our greywacke, right, as you can see, is gray. You can see the sand in there, those white specks, but it's also mixed in with mud, right, which again tells us that we're in an area that's pretty active for sure. And then our lithic sandstone, it's just composed of a whole bunch of stuff. There's definitely sand in there, but there's just a whole bunch of stuff as well. So this tells us that we're probably in an area where a delta once formed. So there you go. Sands are pretty important for helping us interpret what environment we're actually in.